Chapter 9 of the Calling by L.C PYE. Talia. I was met with two green eyes. My mind had stopped working. I tried to think of something to say. Anything at all. His eyes bored into mine, intense and hard. I leaned closer, and the smell of pine and fire smoke engulfed me. He stepped back from me and peered over his shoulder toward camp, while forming fists with his hands. I almost fell into the space he had just occupied. Thanks for, that, I said, pointing at the target, unable to make eye contact with him, heat rising to my cheeks. It was nothing. Like I said, you need to be able to hold on your own, he said. My grip tightened on my bow. I resented any feelings I had just had and how my body reacted to his presence. I took a deep breath and released his hold on my emotions. Did you learn anything in the village? I asked, trying to be normal. Alon can tell you if he wants. Why can't you? Because I don't trust you. His words came out sharp, making my blood boil. I tried to play nice, but I couldn't handle him anymore. What is your problem with me? My voice was cross, but I didn't care. His face didn't move at all. I already told you I don't trust you, he said, completely devoid of emotion. I stomped back to camp, leaving Raph by himself. Alon informed me that they had learned nothing new. No strangers had been through the village recently, and no one had heard of anyone missing. What are we going to do now? I asked Alon. My voice was sharp, with Raph's rude comments and all the secrecy. I was tired of hiding my feelings. We'll continue to follow the direction we believe they were headed. When we come across another village, we will see what information we can uncover. That's it. Do you have a better solution? He tilted his head unexpectantly. I didn't have a better plan, and he knew that. Shaking my head slightly, I headed over to the fire. I didn't say anything for the rest of the night. I was frustrated at our lack of progress in finding Jules and feeling helpless at not knowing how to improve it. I ended up taking my bedroll farther away from everyone, hoping to use sleep as a way to escape, but my mind raced to try to come up with a way to reach Jules faster, and no rest found me. We headed out before dawn. We didn't stop until the sun hit its peak. Exhaustion from not sleeping the night prior pulled at me. I sat against a tree, letting my eyelids rest, thankful for the autumn breeze cooling me off. The food in my lap stayed untouched as I listened to the others talk. The sound of a woodpecker and some forest animals scavenging for food. It all became background noise as I drifted off. When I came to, I was still leaning up against the tree. I lurched forward, realizing the sun was no longer high in the sky. I exhaled again when I heard laughter. They were still in the small clearing ahead of me. Gil danced around Raph. He was relentlessly trying to persuade Raph to do something. It was Eaton's laugh that had awoken me, and he was still laughing at Gil's poor attempt at badgering Raph. Come on, Raph, it's been forever since we've sparred, Gil whined. This isn't the time or the place, Gil, Raph replied. His gaze swept over in my direction, and he became aware that I no longer slept. We stared at each other for a brief moment. My skin burned under the intensity. The others also realized I was awake, and Raph's focus went back to the stick he was carving with one of his knives. Also looking away, I met Gil's eyes. A smile grew on his lips before he turned back to Raph. Fine, I concede. I'll stop bothering you. It's been a while and you're probably afraid that I'll beat you. Gil asserted while walking away from Raph. Raph stopped moving. He put the stick down and stood, putting his knife back into its sheath. First one to tap out loses. Gil's face lit up and he turned back toward Raph. Agreed. They made their way to the center of the small clearing and found everyone but Alon formed a circle around them. My curiosity led me to join the others. I had been wanting to see what they were capable of, plus I had never seen anyone spar before. Gil and Raph faced each other. They were similar in size, but Raph was slightly broader. Gil took a deep inhale and then made the first move. He advanced towards Raph with his fists raised. Raph drew up his fists in anticipation of Gil's attack. I gasped, and it filled the air as Gil threw a punch that I could have sworn was going to hit Raph in the face. But Raph ducked to the right just in time. He spun to the side, sweeping his legs out, causing Gil to stumble in an attempt to regain his balance. Gil attacked as Raph continued to block or evade his efforts, neither showing signs of tiring. They acted as if they could keep fighting for hours, when suddenly Raph changed tactics and took an offense approach. He advanced on Gil, throwing punches instead of swinging them. He had been holding back. Gil didn't have time to retaliate. Raph was too quick. Gil could only evade. Raph threw a jab to Gil's left side, following by a punch to the stomach with his left hand, which Gil hadn't seen coming. I heard the air leaving him as Gil curled over. It gave Raph the opening he needed to come behind and put him in a headlock. The defeat in Gil's eyes was instant. He ceded by tapping Raph's forearm. Your punches are faster, but you still need to conserve your energy. It's about the long game, Raph said, patting Gil on the back. It would be easier if your face wasn't so punchable, Gil responded with a smirk. I had seen people throw punches at each other before, but none of that came close to what I just witnessed. Their attacks were calculated and controlled in comparison to the flailing punches I had seen in the past. Before they could leave the middle of the circle, Nadav stepped forward. Raph, will you do me the honors? Raph faced Nadav and gave a small bow. Gil came over to me and slung an arm over my shoulder. You're in for a treat. Nadav has been teaching Raph a style of fighting from his kingdom. You'll understand when you see it. I gaped at Gil, opening my mouth to ask him to repeat what he just said. Specifically the part about how Nadav and Hafsa were from a different kingdom, so many questions circled in my head, but I doubted any of them would be answered. So far, the only way I've learned anything about them is when they casually let things slip. Movement in the middle dragged my attention away. My questions would have to wait. Raph and Nadav approached one another calmly, their palms open, not closed like Gil and Raph's fight. They were still for a long time, long enough that I began to think no one would ever make the first move. I was about to ask Gil what was happening when Raph lunged. He moved his arms in circular motion, and Nadav responded to each movement accordingly. Their movements were captivating. They didn't shuffle around each other and throw punches. No, their whole bodies moved in sync. They even used their legs to throw kicks at one another. At one point, Raph lowered himself, extending one of his legs, and spun around twice. trying to trip Nadav, but Nadav jumped higher than I had ever seen anyone jump before, dodging both of Raf's attempts. Definitely not normal. They danced around one another in a fluid circular motion. It was beautiful yet dangerous. They seemed evenly matched, both of them evading it and attacking equally. "What is this?" I asked Phil. "It's called Ryu." I think I said that right. "Ryu?" I whispered. "Nadav and Hafsa don't tell us much about where they come from. However, they mentioned that this style of fighting is a part of their culture. It reflects their land's values, ideology, and history. Ideology? And history," Gil explained. I had never wanted to learn how to fight. I had viewed it as something full of anger and hate, but this was different. It was about control and discipline, and it fascinated me. Nadav calmly evaded Raf's attacks and occasionally counterattacks, anticipating what he would do next. He avoided the majority of Raf's strikes without expending too much energy. Raf's patience, however, began to wane, and he started to throw his strikes and kicks without much caution. He threw a series of punches and then brought his leg in an attempt to kick Nadav. Well, I guess while they're barking. Nadav struck out his arm, catching Raf's leg in midair. He threw Raf's leg and delivered his own kick in the center of Raf's chest, sending Raf to his back. Before he could get to his feet, Nadav stood over him and placed a foot on his chest. I held my breath, waiting to see what would happen next. As they stared at each other, finally Nadav reached his hand out to help Raf back to his feet. Raf shook his head and gave Nadav a small smirk. "I almost had you that time," he said to Nadav while wiping the sweat off his face. "You are improving. You still need to work on not revealing your moves to your opponent. You got sloppy at the end. I could tell what you were going to do next. You revealed your sidekick when you wound your whole body in preparation. It's not always about strength, Raf. You need to know the next 3 moves your opponent will make, and then use that to catch them off guard," Nadav lectured. "You could leave it at 'I'm improving,'" Raf joked. "Nadav, my love, why don't you show Raf what you mean?" Hafsa said, entering the circle with a glint in her eye. "I don't know if this is the best time. We shouldn't burn any more daylight. We both know this won't take long," she taunted, Nadav looking like he wanted to argue some more, but he gave in and walked toward Hafsa. Alon stopped what he was doing and joined to watch, glancing around. I noticed everyone was watching with unbridled anticipation. Gil dropped his arm from my shoulder and stepped closer to where Hafsa and Nadav circled one another. Adira pushed off the tree she had been leaning against to stand beside Alon and Eden. Raf crouched as if trying to get a better view of their footwork. Nadav and Hafsa bowed to one another and then began moving around each other. I couldn't tell who made the first move. Their movements were fast and sharp, yet fluid. It was mesmerizing. Part of me forgot they were fighting. It looked like dancing. Nadav moved around Hafsa like how water moves around the rocks in a stream, and Hafsa danced around him in response. She reminded me of a leaf caught in the breeze, floating from one place to the next, never knowing where she would land next. Before I could tell what was happening, Nadav was on the ground and Hafsa kneeled on him with one hand on his chest and the other in the air ready to strike. What happened? I asked no one in particular. Raph, who had at some point came to stand next to Gil, answered my question. She waited until the right moment. When he threw all his weight into a strike, she used it against him by combing her strength through his, and it caused him to lose his balance. I took a moment trying to comprehend what Raph was saying. I never knew fighting was so much strategy. It's not always about being the strongest in a fight, Raph added. My stomach lurched with excitement. Maybe Hafsa would teach me how to fight like that. I would be able to protect myself from anyone. I wouldn't need anyone to come to my defense. Don't worry, one day you might be able to match me. Hafsa smiled as she offered Nadav her hand. I knew the day I met you, I would never be able to match you, my dear. Nadav kissed Hafsa's yeah, I said that right the first time, hand, and she blushed. It was adorable how obvious their love for one another was. One day I would like to find a love like theirs, but Jules was the only thing I could or would focus on right now. Alone chimed in and ordered us all to pack up. It was time to move out. We are approaching another village. Alon stretched his hand in the air, signaling all of us to stop. Nadav, Raph, and Hafsa, you three will be on the lookout. Lookout outside the village. I looked up. Did Alon just announce that I was a part of the group going into the village? I stared at him with disbelief, and he gave me a small nod before continuing. Keep your eyes open for any young women who might be traveling on their own. The rest of us will go into the village. The plan is to discreetly ask about any other strangers that might have passed through. I got the impression Alon had been a soldier of sorts at one point in his life. He talked as if he was going to lead us into battle. We broke from the three lookouts and headed into the village. My pace quickened. I had never been to another village before. As we walked through the village gates, I shuddered to a stop. The layout of the village was almost identical to Gazmere. The village had a penta in the center with the different quarters branching out, the stalls set up in the middle. But there was one big difference that couldn't go unnoticed. No one was there. The penta was deserted. Off in the distance, I could make out a few villagers shuffling by. But that was it. Where was everyone? At this time of day, the penta should be busy with everyone finishing their work. I studied the faces of those with me to see if they were as surprised as I was. They all scanned the area with interest. Where is everyone? I asked. Alon's brows narrowed. Let's spread out and see if anyone will tell us what is going on. Adria, stay with Talia. Adria didn't wait for me as she stalked away. I had to jog after her to catch up. She was the only one in the group that hadn't said a word to me. I was so horrified by the lack of life that her presence didn't intimidate me like usual. Are all villages like this? We passed a stall filled with furs, but no one was managing it. No, her expression didn't change, but she analyzed everything we passed by. To our left, a little girl was dragging herself along, squeezing her stomach. Adria and I focused on her. We were only an arm's length away when the little girl collapsed. That was chapter 9, Calling.